I promised to come back to the questions that we received in writing, and we did get some questions. The first one is transfer of knowledge. And the question is, it's from Colonel Chamain from Chad. And the question is if there is a training program to ensure capacity building, and if not, what is the problem? Is this gap of resources? So I will try to answer that one by saying that no, we don't have a generic training for capacity building, as capacity building should be based on a needs analysis. And there is not a one-size-fits-all solution to capacity building. However, training is one of the tools to be used when building capacity, which needs, as we have heard throughout those days, needs to be supported by equipment, proper salary for police officers to be sustained. Co-location mentoring is other ways of building capacity. And on the question on the resource gaps, you maybe remember Andrew Carpenter yesterday. He asked you several questions. One of them was based on the experience of reform in our own countries. And that is a challenge, to have police officers whom themselves have been part of capacity building, especially out of a conflict. So if we can have more of that in the future, we heard, I gave an example from Burundi, for example, and there are others when they have gone through the peacekeeping phase and they might be able to contribute themselves with their experience. And also to conclude, you also heard Andrew speaking about the strategic guidance framework, which is also aiming at bringing various experience together and in an attempt to define international policing, which is meant to be a basic foundation and platform from which guidelines, such as for mentoring, for example, can follow on that one. The other question I got was on the global effort, on the attempts to get more female officers. And the question is, what has actually the UN leadership done to take vulnerability issues into account, and what has been done to overcome this? Let me then just give a short explanation or background to the global effort that we have been mentioning throughout, and that was launched in 2009. The first thing we did was to identify obstacles, both in the UN system when it comes to recruitment, and we also asked member states to please look in your domestic system when you're recruiting police officers, female police officers, if there's anything there that is a big obstacle for women to even apply. So that's what we did to start. What more we have done is being part of a big network, International Association Women Police. It's been 4 years now since the UN has been a part of that international conference, and we have a UN delegation which consists of UNPOLs from various missions. We have asked them to bring a colleague from the host state with them, a female colleague. And this is all to build a network, to get to know what is it all about, what do I need to do to become a peacekeeper, and to experience how they should prepare themselves and how they can come along. We have also some website initiatives, also again for networking, ask the questions, how can I be a peacekeeper, what do I need to do? On this same occasion, we have, for the two years now, we have also an award to a female peacekeeper. The first time it went to a female police officer from Pakistan, and she was deployed at that time in our mission in Timor-Leste. And this year it was a Turkish police officer currently serving in the mission in Liberia. We are also trying to set up a kind of a regional SAT, the testing of female police officers. And we are hoping that neighboring countries can go together and we can have only female instructors and female police officers to be tested for UN peacekeeping. The idea is to broaden the pool of police officers to pick from. Then I have, we also did this summer, trying to challenge member states. And I wrote a letter to all your permanent missions in New York and to see who wants to be the first, having 50% female, for example. And it doesn't count if you have two, one woman and one man, that doesn't count. But who will be the first to have 50%? And I can take this opportunity to challenge you. Rwanda is one of the top contributors when it comes to female police officers. Who wants to challenge them? Who wants to be number one in terms of giving female officers? Then I have one more question. That was also related to MONUSCO, Congo, and why we are not recruiting officers from the neighboring countries that speaks Kiswahili. And I asked Commissioner Wofi before he left, and the simple answer is that it is somehow a little bit tricky to use neighboring countries. They might be part of the problem instead of part of the solution, and they might be put at risk as well. So that was the answer that he was given to me from that. That was the questions I received from this morning, but also we didn't have too much time for questions yesterday. So if you have other questions, please give me a note or approach the one you have the question to. Now I will hand over to Andrew.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I've been brought back to see if my voice will give out on a moderation session. This afternoon, we're going to be talking about partnerships. So again, it's after lunch, so I'd like to engage you in an interactive activity before we start. Can you turn to the front of your agenda where you have the nice logo? And I just want to draw your attention to the front page. And if I could ask everybody to read along with me where it says, High-Level Conference on International Police Peacekeeping in the 21st Century. And it's not a mistake that we have made on purpose, but it's a choice of language that we have used. And I wonder if there's anybody who has noticed the choice of language, or has it slipped by subtly without any identification. So unfortunately, there is no prize, although I think Stefan has offered a free weekend, yes, in Berlin, all expenses paid, which he will pay out of the Stefan Feller Foundation. Thank you, Stefan. And I win because I spotted it. It's the word international. We didn't say high-level conference on UN police peacekeeping. So this is an attempt by the UN to be ecumenical, saying that whilst we are the largest consumer of police peacekeepers, we don't have a monopoly, nor do we want to be seen as the big kid on the block. We want to be one of many. So the UN, as our colleague from Interpol said, is just ahead of them because we have 193 member states, but they're catching up very quickly. So we're the biggest umbrella. All of our member states belong to a number of different regional and sub-regional organizations which also deploy police peacekeepers. So when we're looking at developing a doctrine, a strategic guidance framework, particularly in a time of economic austerity, it seems nonsensical for us to develop one for the UN, our colleagues from the African Union to develop another one, our colleagues from the European Union to do yet another, our colleagues from the OSCE, ASEANAPOL, so on and so forth, and I apologize if I didn't mention your regional or sub-regional organization. Surely, if we are starting at the beginning, this is a golden opportunity for all of us to come together to make sure that if we have an international something, it is inclusive of all organizations from the smallest to the largest. It's not mine or his or hers, it is simply ours. It will save money. We will have one course for international deployment on a particular topic, which will be interoperable regardless of its UN, EU, AU, ASEAN, so on and so forth. As we saw with the map that our colleagues from ZIF provided, it's rare for a police officer to be working in theater with a single mission. There's a multitude of different agencies and programs all working with similar objectives. So again, ladies and gentlemen, we have perhaps a once-in-a-generation or perhaps even once-in-a-lifetime's opportunity to bring together a unified, harmonized approach which would be valid internationally, almost, as I mentioned yesterday, the FIFA World Cup handbook. So, with that as an introduction of why partnerships are so important, I'm very pleased to introduce the three members of this afternoon's panel. I begin with Maciej Popowski from the European Union's External Action Service. He is a Deputy Secretary General. Then we have Knut Dreyer, who is the OSCE, and I have to emphasize that's not the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, although it sounds very similar in German. This is the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. And Knut is the Senior Police Advisor and the Director of the Strategic Police Matters Unit. And then we have Boy Salamuddin, who is an Inspector General of the Indonesian National Police, but Boy is speaking this afternoon in a capacity for ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. So I've spoken too much, so I'd like to invite Maciej to begin. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and good afternoon to all of you. It's very practical to speak from here because then you won't see that I'm reading my notes. The cooperation with the UN is basically part of European Union's DNA. If we go back to the EU security strategy, our framework document that was adopted in 2003, one of the underpinning principles of the strategy was the principle of effective multilateralism. So hence the relationship with the United Nations is very natural, and we've been trying to translate it into an operational reality since 2003. And the common security and defense policy since very inception, and its operational beginnings go back to 2003 as well, was very much about cooperation with the United Nations as a key strategic partner in many theaters. So we have almost a decade of experience so far, and I think this is a mutually beneficial relationship because we benefit from the legal and political legitimacy of the United Nations, while the UN, facing a growing number of increasingly complex crisis, benefits from EU support, our credibility in certain regions of the world, and our operational capability. I mean, I can quote many examples of our cooperation with the United Nations in a broad range of theaters, from the Balkans to the African Great Lakes and the Horn of Africa. There are different kinds of engagement. I think the first ever operation under the umbrella of at that time it was called the European Security and Defense Policy. The name changed with the entry into force of our new treaty, the Lisbon Treaty. Now it's called this Common Security and Defense Policy. But the first ever operation we launched was the police mission in Bosnia that we took over from the United Nations. And Stefan Feller was the last head of the mission that came to a close in June this year. So it was a first ever friendly takeover, not a hostile takeover. But we've had more. Another example was Kosovo, where we were also we took over more than a police mission. We were basically a successor. We still are to the UNMIC. We took over many functions of UNMIC from the United Nations in Kosovo, and the police and rule of law dimension of our presence is the most visible one. And of course we have a lot of examples of cooperation with the UN in the area of military peacekeeping. There we provided a bridge presence in between of two deployments in Congo, DRC Congo, the so-called Operation Artemis in 2003. We were preparing ground for the UN to take over from us. So another kind of bridging operation in Chad and the Central African Republic in 2008. So there is a body of experience we can build up. So from that we can also derive a number of principles for consideration of future support of the European Union to the UN peacekeeping. First of all, we always want to provide added value and develop this mutual advantage. And I've mentioned that already, so I don't need to repeat that. Second, it's quite important to be very clear from the beginning on the political control and strategic direction. For a given UN or EU operation, from a political to tactical level, there should be only one body providing political control and exercising strategic direction. Of course, we also have to respect our mutual autonomy of decision-making. This is a very important point for the EU member states. The same applies to the unity of the chain of command. If we operate together, whatever model we take, we need to preserve the integrity of the chain of command. The ownership of decision to allocate resources remained national. It's not different in the European Union either. I mean, we don't have any common assets. Huh? We have a common financing mechanism for civilian missions, luckily, but we don't own any common assets. So the ownership remains national. And of course, the UN is free to reach out to member states, our member states directly, if they so wish, and to receive assistance from them on the bilateral basis. The lessons learned process is quite important, and we are going to engage more and more with the UN, comparing notes. As a matter of fact, we established a EU-UN Crisis Management Steering Committee back in 2003, which I have to admit, I mean, it wasn't very active for the first 3 or 4 years, but recently we managed to revive it, and now it's a very vibrant body where we really get operational people together, including the heads of missions and operations. They compare notes, they can also engage, they can compare, I mean, they can talk about lessons learned, but more importantly, they can also talk about the future engagement. So for every meeting we pick 3 or 4 country situations. So last time we met, it was in February, if I remember correctly. We were talking at length about South Sudan and DRC Congo, and this is going to continue. It is quite important, of course, to try to increase direct contributions by the EU member states to peacekeeping operations of the United Nations. So the issue of the cooperation with the UN is always on our agenda, and there is a number of EU member states very much attached to this part of our DNA. I mean, they are pushing this very hard for a good reason and want us to engage more and more. And finally, we should really try to coordinate our support to regional and sub-region organizations. For example, the African Union, which is already the case. So far, the cooperation, in particular the operational aspects of it, was very ad hoc based. But we are at a turning point in the European Union now, and we are determined to move up to a more structured cooperation on the basis of the UN real needs, aimed at increased effectiveness and trying to respond to UN UN appeals. This started already in 2011, and we went back to our member states in July this year with a plan of action to enhance EU CSDP support to UN peacekeeping, which was endorsed by the member states, by our Political and Security Committee. We've identified a number of concrete actions to enhance EU support to the UN peacekeeping, and the UN was actively involved throughout the definition of the actions and will continue to support the process also in the implementation phase. One envisaged action plan aims at providing support to the UN Civilian Capacity Initiative. Another one envisages the establishment of a technical arrangements with DPKO DFS on cooperation in capability development. The idea is to put at the disposal of the United Nations the experience and results the EU has obtained in the field of civilian capability development for CSDP. Implementation, however, will remain challenging, mainly because the EU and UN do not use the same methodology in this specific field. By the end of this year, will define a list of civilian capabilities, including the rule of law capacities, and this is a growing area of our engagement. We are moving more and more from sort of purely policing task into the rule of law area, and Kosovo is probably the best example thereof. So we will define a list of civilian capacities the EU member states can potentially put at UN disposal for peacekeeping operations. So we'll create a policy framework on EU providing a component to a UN peacekeeping operation and establish modalities for coordination between the EU and UN during planning and conduct of EU civilian missions deployed in support of the UN by 2013. We also want to strengthen our coordination on assistance to the African Union and other regional organizations. This has already started. Together with the DPKO, we already contributed to the conceptual development of formed police units of the African Union, or the African Standby Force. We all face difficulties and challenges when it comes to force generation. Because we all in competition for scarce resources nationally and internationally, so we are not free of that challenge. Of course, we will try to do our best, although the solution is not easy, and we can see that our resources are more and more overstretched, and we face significant difficulties in our own operations. So it's not an excuse, but it's a recognition of reality, and we are also trying to think creatively how we can provide more incentives and also facilitate deployment by centralized certain support functions like logistics, for example, that would really make it easier for the member states to generate forces. And we're also exploring the feasibility of a modular approach in our cooperation, the EU taking responsibility for a specific component within the structure of a UN mission. And this option, however, is expected to raise some legal and institutional challenges, in particular when it comes to the command and control arrangements. And finally, I would like to make a point about capacity building. It was raised by Anne-Marie. This is a growing area of our engagement. We only have one civilian mission with an executive mandate. This is EULEX Kosovo. I mean, they have certain executive tasks when it comes to policing, customs, and judiciary. The rest is very much focused on capacity building. All the other civilian missions, and we are running, I think, for the timing, it's already 11 of them in parallel, are really capacity building missions. This has become a European speciality, our competitive edge, if you so wish, and I think it's likely to grow. This is also something that we can, an area where we can, not only cooperate, but also identify complementarity with UN action. Because we have the tools, we have a certain body of experience, we also have instruments other than operational engagement, missions on operations under the umbrella of common security and defense policy to invest in capacity building, also to provide follow-on actions once a given mission on operation comes to an end, in order to define a credible exit strategy. To sum up, so we're in this together. This is going to continue. I think there is a lot of political will within the European Union to engage more and more with the United Nations, and I'm quite optimistic that given the number of challenges, we'll get even closer together in the months and years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Since this is the first time I'm speaking here today and yesterday, I take the opportunity to thank the UN Police Division and the German MFA for organizing this very interesting seminar and letting me also have the opportunity to speak on behalf of my organization, which is probably not so well known. On the other hand, I'm a little bit disappointed that I see so few participating states here from my own regional area from the OSCE area. I don't know why, but I had hoped more of them to come here, because they are a big contributor. Many of the states in the OSCE are big contributor to UN missions. I've been asked to say some words about partnership in the area of police peacekeeping. But first, let me give some little background information about the OSCE, so you know a little bit more about what the organization stands for. The OSCE is probably not known very well to everybody here, but it is the largest regional security organization in the world. And as Andrew said yesterday, we usually have a grand slogan saying we are covering the area from Vancouver to Vladivostok, which may be true to some extent. The organization is partly doing business in the east of Vienna area and partly in the west of Vienna. But there is a slight overweight to the eastern part, especially in policing business. I will come back to that later on. The organization consists of 56 participating states. It is the EU states, of course. It's the former Soviet Union, plus the US and Canada, Switzerland, Norway, and maybe some other minor states I forgot. We have a comprehensive security concept, which means that we work through 3 dimensions, through 3 pillars. The political, military pillar, where you have all disarmament, destruction of old arms, where you have police business, where you have development of armed forces, etc. We have the economic and environmental dimension, where you promote business, where you promote good environmental basic structures. We have also the human dimension pillar, where you have the rule of law, where you have development of election procedures, good governments in the local society, etc. And all these are covered at the same time and at the same engagement in the missions. We have at the moment 16 field missions, where we have 12 police components, 12 missions with police components. The 2 biggest ones are the Serbian mission and the Kosovo mission. And the smallest one we have in Turkmenistan. That's only a small office of 2 people. The OSCE headquarters, the Secretariat, in which I work, we have our headquarters located in Vienna. In Vienna, we also have the main decision-making body, the Permanent Council. It's delegations from all participating states and their ambassadors meeting regularly every Thursday and dealing with current issues and daily business according to the agenda. Yearly, we have a ministerial meeting. The rotating chairmanship invites every year to their capital for a ministerial meeting. And now and then we have a summit meeting. Last year we had a summit meeting in Kazakhstan, in Astana. This year we will have a ministerial in Dublin, 5th of December. And next year we will have a ministerial in Kiev. The Ukrainian are coming in as chair of the OSCE, as we know. I'm looking forward to that, Chairman. We have already had a lot of contacts with your organizations to promote the chairmanship. How do we function? That was a basic background about our organization in large. There are many more details to be said, of course. But how do we function? Mainly on 3 levels. We have the level of individual host country, where we have some specificities to take account for. Many of the countries they live in a post-conflict situation, not necessarily through a war, but through their political struggles inside the country. Many of the countries are going through phases or through areas of transition. They are transition from a conflict state to a peaceful set in the state. They have a transition from a dictatorship to democracy. They have a third from a planned economy to a market economy. And all these three transition processes has to be conducted at the same time and in parallel. Many of the countries have not, since history, institutions, state institutions, local government institutions in place, which makes this process very complicated, and it needs to be addressed holistically. The second level we have is a regional level. I would say also that on the first individual level, the host country is always requesting our assistance. It's not for us to come with a mandate from any decision body. It is for the host country to make a formal request for assistance in any area, and then we will establish through a PC decision a specific mission with a mandate. We have the regional level, which is more our ownership. The Secretariat can decide on regional events, activities, which we often do. And the tendency in the police area over the last years has been to become more and more regional and to leave the host country activities. The third level is the total OSCE region, which means high-level meetings, expert meetings, gatherings of heads of missions, gatherings of heads of law enforcement departments for discussions and consultations. Our activities range from long-term projects and programs which can last for, in Serbia now, 10 years. In some other countries, a shorter term. But that gives us a history. We can build up an institutional memory, and that will, in the long run, help and advance our activities in the country in question. Everybody in this room, we know that to reform a police force, that is not a quick fix. That takes many, many years. For example, in my own country, we changed 1995. We had a paradigm shift in the police, in the philosophy how to work, and still, I would say we need to see it come through all the way. So it's a long process, and never be uncertain of that. We also organize, of course, from these long-run projects, long-term projects, down to the one-day roundtable seminars, study trips, and whatever. So then the question would be, what are we doing? As you already understood, we are mainly a police development organization. We have some, let's say, executive mandates. We have had that in the Balkans in the early days. We now, the closest we come to executive mandate, I wouldn't say it is, but the closest we come to it is the activity we have in Kyrgyzstan, in the south of Kyrgyzstan. We call it CSI, Communal Security Initiative, which is more or less policing, but it's not. So it's a very, very delicate matter. But mainly we are doing police reform. And we don't aspire, like Andrew told us yesterday, we don't have and we don't aspire to have a standard model. We always adopt to the local culture, the local legislative tradition. We see that as very important to have the local ownership. If we come with a prepared model, they would just maybe take it aboard, but it will not be sustainable. We have the way to do business. We get the request on support. We go there. We have a discussion on the ministerial level. We have a MOU. We make an assessment together with the host country. We define the goals. We define what is their needs. Then we, together with the host country, we produce a project proposal or a program proposal. We conduct that together with the host country as member of the steering committee. And that's the way we do it. And we assess it together and we follow up, of course. We have two types of funding. We have core budget funding and we have extra budgetary funding. That can be, if any country is interested in explicitly fund a specific project or program, it's possible for them. What, on the other hand, is fully basic and which we never ever discuss is that we have our OSCE core values, which is over and over again pronounced by the participating states in documents. The last was in Astana declaration from 2011, which is basically, for my part, it is the concept of democratic policing, a civilian police force or service, whatever. Sorry, Anne-Marie. This is for us non-negotiable, of course. The basic values of policing, democratic policing, has to be there. Rule of law, transparency, you know all these buzzwords. In police reform, we look at institution building, which is of course important. Not only of course, it is important, it's crucial for many of these countries lacking institutions. We need to establish them and help them build them up. We put a lot of effort into assisting in developing the police academies. The curricula in the police academies need to be revised, need to be discussed and adapted to the needs which they have and which we can see together. All police reform has to be based on a good judicial ground. The legal conditions has to be sorted out. We do a lot of expert revision of the police legislation, the criminal justice legislation as such. And we are not we, of course, in the Secretariat or in the mission, we use experts from other participating states. And we always try to find partners with the country in question. They often have cultural, language connections to some other country which can be positive and can be used, which we do. Furthermore, of course, we have training in specific areas under the umbrella of police reform. Intra and interstate cooperation is also a key element in our police development. You have to have a good, sound, and developed intrastate cooperation between law enforcement, judicial system, correction system. Otherwise, you can't go out international and work together on a regional or a global basis. So it starts in the small cooperation at home between the police, prosecutor, courts, customs, tax revenue service, you name them. They have to cooperate, otherwise they can't really go out. They will not be trusted and they will be left behind. We do specific requests, of course. We can do some ad hoc trainings, which we do. We have been doing forensic training for some participating states. We have, at the moment, on the table, we have a request to start a public order management discussion in the country in question, starting with a high-level discussions on the concept on free assembly, freedom of speech, etc., and how you regard your own population in the concept. We have also done a lot of management of human resources training and development, which is often a question for having the totality of the police reform work. You have to take care of your own staff and you have to create proper rules, you have to create a proper recruitment system, etc. Finally, we have also a third aspect. We have thematic mandates. We have been mandated by the PC, Permanent Council, and the ministerial councils to deal with organized crime, with terrorism, with trafficking in human beings, and illicit trafficking of drugs. Not to forget minority issues and gender issues. These are thematic mandates that we have, and we have to be active in these areas. In regard to minority and gender issues, we have to streamline that into our different projects and programs and efforts. That is what and how we are working together. And as you see, it's an organization that is very embedded into the host country, into the environment in which we work. We work very closely with the host country and with, of course, other organizations. So we are an organization that is constructed, let's say, to have a lot of partners and to engage in deep partnerships. And the most important partner for us, as you understand, is the host country. That is the most important partner. We have to deal with central and local governments and representative authorities. The parliament, we work with the parliaments, the security committees in the parliaments. We work with the presidential administration. We work with the prime minister's office, with all the line ministries that are applicable, agencies, local communities. We have to especially look at the partners in the criminal justice system, with the prosecution office, prosecutor general, with the Supreme Court, etc. Not to forget civil society organizations, NGOs, academia, political parties in the country, private companies, and last but not least, the media. You have to find a good partner in the media, so you get fair, good, correct, and as long as possible, a proper and timely presentation in the media. Without that, it will be easily created a wrong picture of your efforts. We had that problem 2 years ago in Kyrgyzstan when we started this communal security initiative. It started very badly because of the media. Not of the media, but of the picture that was given to the media through the parties that didn't like that, the opposition in the country. So it had to be put on standby for a year. And then when we came back, we started to engage the media. And now the picture is quite different. It's positive, it's accepted, the population like it. And we see there clearly how important the media is as a partner. We have to cooperate with the donors closely. Donors are constantly asking for results, what is happening, what is ongoing. We have to inform them, and that they have a legitimate interest, of course. This includes bilateral and multilateral organizations, which are sometimes co-donating into our projects. We have some police partners. I'd like to just list a few of them. The CSTO, the Collective Security Treaty Organization. We have the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. We have the Central Asian Regional Information and Coordination Center located in Tashkent. We do a lot of programs, projects together with CARIC in regard to combating drugs. We have controlled delivery exercises, for instance, throughout the whole region, including Russian Federation and the Russian DAA. We have internal coordination with the institutions in the OSCE. We work very closely together with ODIHR in producing handbooks, manuals on human rights aspects of policing. We work with the Regional Cooperation Center in Sarajevo, We do a lot of projects in management, etc. with them. UNODC is our closest partner. They live just across the river, so in Vienna, so we meet them often. We have Europol, we have Interpol, we have DCAF, we have CEPOL. We do a lot of training together with Domodedova Institute in Moscow, with TADOC in Turkey. We have also close cooperation with the International Association of Police Colleges. So it's a lot. Andrew just gave me 1 minute, so I will conclude shortly. Our tools for this partnership we have with the UNODC, we have a joint working plan that we have for the last 2 years, I think we had them. With TADOC and the International Association of Police Colleges, we have a cooperation agreement. TADOC is a Turkish anti-drug academy. We are now presently discussing with Interpol and CEPOL to formalize our cooperation through agreements or memos of understanding. So, to please Andrew, I could speak a lot more, but to please Andrew, ladies and gentlemen, just let me to conclude with 3 remarks. Cooperation and coordination, cooperation and coordination, and cooperation and coordination. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Excellencies, senior police officials, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by expressing my sincere appreciation to the government of Federal Republic of Germany, the UNDPKO, as well as the organizing committee for the convening of this important and timely conference. It is a great honor for me to deliver my remarks in front of such an eminent group and share with you Indonesia's experiences and perspective on police peacekeeping. Ladies and gentlemen, in the 21st century, the increasing demand and importance of police peacekeepers in supporting global peace operations is undeniable. In the last decade, policing mandates have become much more varied and complex. Today, police peacekeepers not only make vital contributions toward protecting individuals, but also contribute to establishing a stable and peaceful political order in countries emerging from conflict. Unfortunately, police peacekeeping missions have not always been provided with clearly defined mandates, adequate resources, and secure financial support to achieve peaceful solution to conflict. It is for that reason that today's deliberation serves as an important platform to identify and define the right police capacities for the new challenges of the 21st century. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, Indonesia, by nature, is highly bound to the word peace. My constitution, or Indonesian constitution, provides a clear mandate to contribute to the maintenance of international peace and security. Indeed, Indonesia takes great pride in its continued contribution to the cause of global peace. Indonesia has participated actively in the UN peacekeeping going as far back as 1956, since Indonesia first Garuda, this is the name of Indonesia contingent, deployment to the Suez Canal. In terms of police contribution, Indonesia's first deployment began in 1989, when 50 civilian police officers from Indonesia joined UNTAC in Namibia to ensure the independence of Namibia through free and fair elections. Since then, the Indonesian National Police has sent its officers to join various UN missions in Mozambique, Cambodia, former Yugoslavia countries, Sudan, Haiti, and the newly independent state of South Sudan. By the end of September 2012, 1,486 Indonesian police officers would have been deployed to 14 UN missions. Ladies and gentlemen, through Indonesia's dedicated and continued participation in UN peace mission, we have identified several key elements and capacities that are indispensable for a successful UN mission. First and foremost, Indonesia believes that all peacekeeping missions must be provided with clearly defined mandates and adequate resources which reflect and uphold the principle of UN peacekeeping, namely, 1. Consent of the host government and the main parties to the conflict. Second, impartiality. Third, the non-use of force except in self-defense and defense of the mandate. Since the mandate of police peacekeeping have become much more complex, which include developing community policing in refugee or IDP camps, mentoring local police officers, hence to succeed, the need for a clearly defined mandate as well as adequate resources is even more vital. This effort to match UN mandates with the required resources must be also supported by increased coordination between the Security Council, Secretariat, police contributing countries, as well as the host countries. Secondly, Indonesia underlines the importance of a cultural approach. On this point, I agree with the OSCE to exercise the smart cultural approach to the local actors as a key element to achieving sustainable peace and security. Throughout several UN missions, Indonesia has adopted the cultural approach. The nature of today's conflict requires police peacekeepers to have a deeper understanding of the cultural environment in which a particular conflict exists. Professionalism alone is not enough. Indonesia believes that the ability to speak eye to eye with the host government and local actors are crucial. A cultural approach enables police peacekeepers to gain the much-needed trust from the locals to build and sustain peace in conflicted countries. Last but not least, Indonesia places great importance in fulfilling training gaps, needs and requirements of police peacekeepers. The rapidly evolving nature of UN peacekeeping requires a precise understanding of training requirements to be successful in missions. Aside from having specialized policing skills, a 21st century police peacekeeper also requires intangible interpersonal skills to succeed. Indonesia believes that a good police peacekeeper in the 21st century must have the ability to be a networker, a consultant, an avid trainer, and an agent of social change, as well as being a good negotiator. For that reason, the Indonesian National Police has since introduced a training curriculum to develop these interpersonal skills throughout our peacekeeping centers in Indonesia. Those efforts were further supported by the development of a competencies-based training and recruitment system for our human resources. We envision that the development of these skills could also be applied regionally. Thus, in 2008 and 2012, Indonesia has offered to establish an ASEAN-Nepal peacekeeping center based in the outskirts of Jakarta, my capital city, as part of our effort to streamline training needs and capacities throughout the region. Indonesia places great importance in streamlining processes and procedures to ensure a standardized policing approach in UN peace missions. We hope that our efforts to streamline training through the establishment of regional peacekeeping center will be further supported, and we are open for any possible cooperation in this endeavor. Andrew just mentioned that, not new term actually, but very fundamental, very significant terms, international peacekeeping operation. This is very early announcement, Andrew, and I said already with Anne-Marie that next December, 12 December 2012, Indonesia will host an ASEAN-Nepal peacekeeping operation seminar, something like that. So we are glad to invite also UNDPCO to be one of key speakers in that event. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, another important point that needs to be highlighted is the increasing need for female UN police personnel in the peace missions. In August 2009, the UN Police Division published the Global Effort and Gender Initiative, which laid out the goal of having 20% female police by 2014. Indonesia fully supports this initiative. In fact, our national laws require women to take up to 30% in national participation, including in UN peacekeeping operation. In this regard, the Indonesian National Police has prepared 50 female police officers to be deployed as police advisors in various UN missions all over the world in the near future. Just small thing for comparative perspective. Currently, INP strength is nearly 600,000 personnel, and nearly 20% are policewomen. So this is very, very good ratio for supporting any UN mission in the future time. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let me end with this final point. Earlier in June 2012, Indonesia had the honor to co-host with Australia the first of 4 regional meetings for the development of the strategic guidance framework, which Mr. Andrew take the lead to organize this meeting in Indonesia. For international police peacekeeping in Jakarta Center for Law Enforcement Cooperation. It is located in Semarang, Central Java, one of regional centers within Asian region. The goal of this SGF is to provide a more consistent, harmonized approach to policy recruitment and training of police components in UN peacekeeping operations, which is closely related to what we are trying to achieve here today. A crucial point which came out of our deliberations in Semarang was the importance of establishing linkages between guidelines and capabilities with the needed resources and equipment to carry out mandated tasks. So today, as with the SGF, we must ensure that the UN mission not only provide clearly defined mandates to our peacekeepers, but also adequate and sustained resources. This, I believe, will ensure that the international policing peacekeeping in 21st century delivers the right capacities for the new challenges. Once again, I would like to take this opportunity to extend Indonesian great appreciation to the government of Federal Republic of Germany, to UNDPKO, and also to Commissioner Feller for making this conference very professional and effective. Thank you very much.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so we've heard, in recapping, the capacities of the European Union the niche value of the OSCE, and how Indonesia will act as a catalyst for police cooperation in Southeast Asia, plus an invitation to the ASEANapol conference. I see Stefan Feller has, put up for the first question. So Stefan, go ahead.
Thanks. What I wanted to start with is what I forgot earlier. Mr. Cyril Lebam, whom we had invited to speak on behalf of the African Union already yesterday, he sent you and us an email apologizing, so he couldn't make it on a very, very short notice. And I sincerely, I really was hoping to see the African Union perspective here as well, but I think I can place that question anyway, because from my perspective it's so important. I have personal memories of cooperation between the European Union and the African Union on an operational level. We were supporting, when the African Union was challenged with AMIS as a predecessor of UNAMID, we were trying to help and to assist by providing a couple of senior police officers in order to strengthen the chain of command and to advise there. We have experiences between the European Union and ASEAN. When I just think at what we have been doing and what was such a successful thing in Banda Aceh when ASEAN and European Union operated. And I have personal memories with regard to the then police advisor Mark Kröker and then strategic police matters unit head Richard Monk, when we were sitting on various occasions, and I was the head of the European Union police unit, to find out how can we do better together. You have been very ambitious, and in order, I would say, that you deserve that I invite you for a weekend to Berlin. I was just wondering, since this is about cooperation, and I have, through my time in Bosnia and Herzegovina, I have missed much of that development. Do we have an increased cooperation between the European Union and the African Union? Do we have a continuation, or on which level, a continuation of the cooperation between the European Union and ASEAN? And is there any ground, for example, of that what we three of us discussed many years ago, that we would have something like a cooperation on crisis management, peacekeeping, or peace support operations between the European Union, African Union, and the United Nations? I mean, if you say it's a unique opportunity to come up with a strategic guidance framework and with harmonized training at least, and with my experience in both organizations, there needs to be a policy level underneath which then would serve us in order that we can do that. Where is that right now? I was just curious and wondering if I could answer that question to participants.
Okay. Thank you, Stefan. Any other questions before I go to the panel to talk about ongoing cooperation? At the back on the right-hand side. Yes, please, sir.
Francis from Zambia. It's a follow-up question, and this question is actually directed at Mr. Knut. I also want to find out if at all there's been a cooperation and coordination of your organization in terms of training the police in human rights, particularly in conflict regions. Thank you.
Okay, and then a question from the distinguished representative of Egypt. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, my question is on the African Union and about the status of partnership with the African Union regarding the African standby force, and how can we support the Union to have better on what concerning police, because from our following, we are following the African standby force work, and we feel it's much more on military. There is no real emphasis on issues concerning police. So I think this is an issue that need to be addressed, and we can have a kind of partnership with the UN or with the European Union or the OSCE regarding that. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm going to close the questions and turn to the panel. There was a direct question to Knut about training. So if we start with that, and then we'll work back and look at some examples of inter-organizational cooperation.
I hope it's on. Yeah. Yes, we have had a lot of training for police officers in human rights in policing. together with the different actors. We have, as I mentioned, the ODIHR inside our OSCE family. We have the High Commissioner for National Minorities also in our own family. We have the Council of Europe and for sure somebody else organization I just now can't remember. But we had a lot of human rights training. We introduced this, we have a strategic approach to it. We introduce it into the curriculum at the police academies as a subject as such. At the same time, we also work hard on to have it integrated in the police legislation, into the criminal procedural code, into the police act on how police is doing their business, into the correctional instruments, and also into the court systems and the prosecution system. So we do a lot of training, but we do also these strategic efforts, as I mentioned.
Okay. Boy?
Thank you. I just want to respond to how we develop or how we extend our cooperation. As we all believe that peace and security is one of the global issues. And another global issue is transnational organized crime. I believe that there's no even single superpower state in this world can address or deal with the strategy to overcome such kind of threat. Similar to that situation, peace and security also, I think, we have to extend extra or inter-regional cooperation or collaboration. I realize that ASEAN Nepal a little bit left behind European Union and African Union, but we are in the process to optimize our role in terms of providing police peacekeeper to support the UN mission. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Maciej?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, the African Union is a partner of choice, a strategic partner of choice, and this goes back to, I think, 2005 or 2006. Specifically when it comes to policing, I mean, you said it yourself, Stefan, that mainly engaged, that's the only case I remember now, by providing support to the hybrid operation of the UN and the African Union in Darfur. Recently, the focus was very much on the military peacekeeping, and first of all on the AMISOM operation in Somalia, where we are the major provider of funding through the so-called Africa Peace Facilities, a specific instrument of the European Union that was set up, I think it was in 2007, that we used to finance operations, but also some capacity building, and you also mentioned the African peace and peace and security architecture, of which there is a police component. This also has been founded by us. So we will be also looking at the future of this instrument. I mean, it runs until 2014, and then we'll have to decide whether or not to renew it. We also always operate a 7 years budget in the European Union. So we may look into specific needs if they are identified by the EU. And we have a lot of exchanges. I mean, it has intensified over the last years. We have the so-called PSC to PSC meeting, so it's a Political Security Committee of the European Union meeting the Peace and Security Council of the African Union. So we have ample fora to talk about it and identify potential needs. But we also engage in police training in Africa, not necessarily through the African Union, but this is something that the African Union has a keen interest in. The recent example is the capacity building mission in Niger. It's called UCAP, EU Capabilities or Capacity. Niger just started, where we are going to train the Niger law enforcement agencies, mainly police and gendarmerie, anti-terrorism and general police training. So this is a very concrete example. The engagement with other regional players, this has started. We have had some contacts with ASEAN through our services. So, for example, the Crisis Management Planning Directorate send a mission to Jakarta to engage with their counterparts in ASEAN. And we are more than happy to develop that in the future. We also started to talk to the Arab League. I mean, not in terms of operational engagement, but we offered them, and they gladly took up this offer to set up a crisis room in the context of the ongoing crisis in Syria. So we also engaged with the Arab League as a regional player. Thank you.
Okay, and if I can follow up the question from Egypt about the African Standby Force. Being an opportunist of the worst type, given the African Union's not here, what I would say is perhaps we should look to, instead of enhancing the African Union's police secretariat, we could simply take those posts and put them in the police division at New York, you know, in this one organizational approach. Since everything we produce, we share with our colleagues with the African Union. Currently, there are 2 UN police officers based in Addis Ababa as our conduit supporting African Union missions. Recently, we have loaned the African Union our premier police planner, Jaswant Lal from the Fiji Islands, to assist the African Union with the conduct of its Amani Africa operations. You know, so that we are very much, you know, hand in glove with the African Union, you know, working with the police elements of the Africa Standby Forces. But I mean, this is one of the questions that I think that Stefan pointed to. You know, what is the address of African Union policing? You know, I would be happy to be stand corrected, but I don't think there is a post of senior police advisor African Union, you know, AUPOL. And I mean, I think that is something which is missing. If we could have that postal address. And again, as an Englishman, I would be mildly critical of the European Union again. You know, with, you know, obviously the European Union is free to do what it likes, but again, with the civilian crisis management concept, you know, we have lost the institutionalized police post. You know, we have run on personal contacts. You know, and I look to Knut Dreyer, who's the third incarnation of the OSCE Senior Police Advisor, which has now been subsumed into transnational threats. And this is all good, but the question is, where is that blue policing thread? And I think we have to be careful, you know, in moves for greater integration, that we do not sacrifice police-to-police, you know, cooperation, you know, on the altar of something greater. So I think, you know, we can integrate, as speakers have said all the way along, policing does not exist in a vacuum. You know, if we are not integrated with the colleagues across the criminal justice sector, you know, it's all for naught, as they say in the north of my country. But it is important to have that very distinct, you know, blue resonating thread which goes along. So I think if we could say to our African colleagues, you know, our strong recommendation would be for a senior police official to be appointed, and, you know, the first trip, I would say, you know, for he or she, you know, to come to New York, and what is ours is yours, and we'd like to work, you know, together. So now I give you the thorny question. We have brought the program back to almost German efficiency. So more questions or coffee?
A very practical one. Andrew. A very practical one to Mr. Popovsky. I have just received a report that in the Security Council of the United Nations, you know, there is a motion to adopt a resolution on Mali, which would require the United Nations to prepare very specific plans on international intervention in Mali and Sahel. So my question is, impromptu remark, what we can do together on Mali as we stand today in preparing for such an intervention? Thank you.
This is a very pertinent issue that is being discussed in Brussels as we speak. We are looking at two things. One is the potential support of the European Union to the ECOWAS force that is going to be put together by ECOWAS, but the conditions are very unclear, and we are really waiting for the developments in New York. So this is a very welcome first step. But this resolution, I mean, the only operational provision is that the Secretary General is going to report after 30 days on this situation on the ground and then see whether the conditions have been met to authorize the ECOWAS deployment. So once it's there, the authorization is there, we should be able to support it. And the other related but separate work strand is potential support of the European Union to the training of the re-establishment of the Malian army. So we are looking at that as well. Whether or not it's going to be a training mission, I can't say no. This is something we are looking into, but the member states are still in the process of looking at, agreeing that, and I think a decision may be taken in November. Whether or not there's going to be a civilian component remains to be seen. I mentioned the police mission in Niger that just started. I mean, it is in Niger, not in Mali, although because the situation is so much related, we already established a liaison officer. He is embedded in the EU delegation in Bamako and provides feedback from Mali to the mission in Niger.
Okay, with that, I see no one else wishing to take the floor. So coffee break, and I think we're back at past. Thank you very much, panelists.